It is now 95 days away from the scheduled opening kickoff. But as schools and conferences across the country plan their return, Charles Barkley was on Paul Finebaum's show yesterday expressing concern about what it may look like.
The one thing I hope they don't do is separate the teams and play the haves and the have-nots. I think that would be awful for the game. I don't want to see college football where only the Power 5 conferences play, or only the SEC and the PAC and the Big Ten play. I don't think that's fair just because they are big schools and they're big money makers.
It's always worth hearing from Charles, but as Laura and Paul join us here, Paul, it was on your show that he said that. What was the context? Because as I read the comments and hear them there, I'm not exactly sure I understand what he's concerned about.
Greeny, I've known Charles for nearly 40 years. I covered him in high school and college. Does anyone ever know what he's talking about? But I think what he was referring to is this. If only a handful of schools play, Big Ten, SEC, maybe some of the ACC and the Pac-12 and others don't, is it really fair? That's my best guess at deciphering him. Laura, you have a shot?
Yeah, Paul, I think what he's talking about may even be a little more based around these group of 5 programs. And the reason why I put that out there is because I do think that Charles probably talks to some of the same people that we do, or maybe he just has some of the same thoughts. But there was this time period where many were so concerned about how these group of 5 and these smaller programs were going to survive all of this. And I think that's why you saw a hesitation to maybe go full steam ahead from some of the places that thought they could, just to try and protect these others. Now that's shifted. Now everyone's like, look, we just got to do what's going to be best for us, whether that's right or wrong. And that is where you kind of look around and say, I wonder what the viability long term will be for some of these smaller schools and smaller programs. And it's just unfortunate in all of it. We've already seen some of these universities have to cut some of their sports, and you just wonder if it eventually trickles to football.
Yeah, that's really, you know what? That's interesting, because we sit here and we talk about Alabama and Ohio State and all of them all the time, because that's what most people are interested in. But these are important football programs. They're important to their schools. They're important to their players. Mm-hmm. Is there serious jeopardy that we could see the kind of change as a result from this that they don't recover from quickly, or maybe even ever? Laura?
Yeah, I think so, Greeny, and it's sad because we, of course, talk about all these big-time players and big-time programs that lead guys directly to the NFL and all these draft picks that come out of the Ohio States and the Alabamas of the world. But then there are some who have gotten a scholarship and an education and an opportunity to play a game that they love in some of these smaller schools. And I don't know how possible it's going to be for some of those schools to survive if they can't play football in some way, shape, or form. And there really is concern around the country for a lot of that. Another thing, too, people don't like those cupcake games, quote unquote, but those universities that play those cupcake games and are unfortunately the cupcake of the game, they make so many hundreds of thousands of dollars from playing those games. Those may be in jeopardy, too, some.
Yeah, those are incredibly important on both sides. Candidly, the Alabamas of the world could live without those more easily than the teams that they're playing there. What other concerns are you hearing, Paul? Because it feels like there's a lot of optimism moving forward in a lot of these sports. What are you hearing on your show?
Yeah, on that last point there, Greeny, I read the other day where Charlotte, which is a fairly new program, is playing at Tennessee, opening game. It's about a $2 million game. They can't survive without it. And one of the other things, and all kidding aside, Charles was talking about this, I believe, that these smaller programs can't afford to test like the Alabamas and the Notre Dame, so that could cut them out. But the only thing that has interrupted the positivity train, Greeny, is what the Michigan president said yesterday in the Wall Street Journal. There's still a lot of reaction to that. I think there'll be a lot more today when everyone slowly gets back after the Memorial Day weekend.
For those who didn't hear it, and again, the president of the University of Michigan is by trade an immunologist, and he said that if there are no students on campus in the fall, that there will not be football in the fall or any other sports. Laura, is that something we're hearing from most other places? I feel like it's the opposite of what we're hearing in other places.
It is the opposite of what we're hearing, Greeny, but I do think, to Paul's point, there's more that's starting to bubble up about concerns now that this really is real, that these players are coming back on campus. We just spoke to Jimbo Fisher, the Texas A&M head coach, on First Take yesterday, and he was talking about how they're going to have their incoming freshmen today getting back to campus. They're going to test them, and I talked to a variety of coaches that say they're both going to give out coronavirus tests and antibody tests, but it's up to each individual school as to whether they test that way or whether they test that way at all. The screening proposals in place happen no matter what. That's checking temperatures, that's checking symptoms, things like that. But the actual testing is up to the individual school. And I think that's where this really may get very interesting over these next couple of weeks as these players start to come back on campus.
And it does come back to cost. And Paul, we brought that up, and that's right. Those are expensive things to do, and not everyone has the ability to do them. Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.